Hey everyone, it's Helen from SMB Deal Hunter. Today we have Nick Patrick with us, an entrepreneur who both acquired a wedding venue and catering company that he sold to a family office, and then 2.5 months ago acquired a residential and commercial solar company based in Denver, Colorado. So I'm really looking forward to hearing Nick's story. Nick, it's great to have you on today.
Yeah, appreciate you having me, Helen, and yeah, looking forward to our conversation.
Nick, tell us about your background first. What were you doing before all of this?
Yeah, my first job out of college was at Fidelity Investments. I was entry level and spent 8 years working my way up the rungs into becoming a financial advisor. And yeah, that's kind of where I hit the wall of is this what I'm doing for the rest of my life? And didn't want it to be that case, and learned about the world of buying and operating a business at that point.
That's so interesting. I don't know anyone who's worked 8 years at the same job, so that's that's very cool.
Yeah, they treat you well. Continue to educate me, and I was like, I can't get anything better any elsewhere. So yeah, they're doing it right.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear. And I mean, tell us, you discovered this whole entrepreneurship through acquisition world. Um, what was the type of business you were looking for that first time around? Did you know you wanted to buy a wedding venue, a catering company, or what was that search like?
Yeah. I mean, I was single and never been to a wedding, so yeah, I was like all in on weddings. No, I had read the how to buy a business, listen to the podcast. So my checklist was as generic as it gets of business of this size with recurring revenue, yada yada yada. I didn't know what I didn't know, and so I was just like, yeah, we'll go look for these businesses and see what comes along.
Where were you looking? What were some of the deals you looked at? And how long did it take before you found the wedding venue?
Definitely. Yeah. So I was living in San Francisco at the time. I'm originally from Colorado. All my family's in Colorado. Relationship was long distance. So I was like, this is a good transition back to Colorado. Um, and so I had been at the point of I got my quit date set up. I'm going to be, just doing all on market at that time. And that's when things were reversed at that point. This is probably like maybe 4 years ago, 5 years ago. Everyone was doing a traditional search, which was all off market, and buying something that was listed was a smaller percentage of the deals that were getting done. So it was just kind of interesting. But I was looking at anything and everything under the sun, kind of how you start, when you're like on biz buy sell of let's look at this, let's look at this, let's look at this. So my buy box hadn't really been defined other than my personal experience, which had been, sales, relationship building, high tickets items with a longer sales process. I felt I could add a lot of value to a business that operates in that way.
That's interesting. And what did you like about the wedding venue business? How long into
Yeah.
the search did you find that? What did that
Yeah, I
look like?
mean, I was still employed. This was, I wasn't having to go into the office. So I was kind of that standpoint of like anything and everything I can do now is, icing on the cake. And then I'll jump into it full time. Um, so I wanted nothing to do with this business. I passed on it the first time I saw it within 24 hours. But 6 months later, that broker reached out and she's like, "Hey, you should come meet the owners." And I'm like, "I haven't met any owners yet. Let's do it." Um, and so once I met them, did a little bit more research, understood the financials of the business and also the backlog, identified a few things. One, stellar reviews, like flawless reputation. Um, they had, over $1 million in booked events, which was, obviously attractive. And then the cash conversion cycle as business was crazy. So if you were going to get married at our venue or married at a different venue, we were going to cater. Um, we're going to take 50% deposit 6 months out, and then you're going to pay that remaining 50% deposit a week prior to the event. And so I didn't know how awesome that was relative to other businesses. But yeah, getting paid, having no accounts receivable, was super attractive. I'm like, so I could get into this business and get a check on closing with all those deposits that were already were already received.
That's super interesting. Were you looking at a certain size business to kind of replace your income? How did you sort of think about that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I certainly needed, a relatively decent income. I wasn't extravagant and I was single at that time. So yeah, I looked at it of, I'm not going to go buy a, giant business just because I have no clue what I'm doing. I've managed two people in my life. So I was looking in that kind of, north of 300,000, FDE or EBITDA up to about, 800,000 or so. Seemed like a reasonable number where I'm not, gonna end up like getting myself into something I either don't like, can't get out of, and was just scared of bigger businesses, quite honestly, at that point.
No, that makes sense. And how big was this business, and what was the team like in place already, or was it just completely owner operated?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So husband wife team. Husband was the chef. The wife was, a lot of like the front end planning and stuff. And they had previously I had one employee who'd been there for a number of years, who was doing all the sales, um, and some of the wedding planning. And she had left because they said, "Hey, we're going to put this thing out of business." So, when I got in there, there wasn't much there. It's like, okay, I'm gonna have to hire some chefs, for day one, get a little bit of transition period. I made it contingent of, I'm gonna have to be able to hire this woman back who's been working here, for 4 or 5 years, or I think probably more than that, more than 5 years previously. Um, and I'm gonna just jump into actually operating. There was a really robust wait staff, which is, the part-time working weddings. There wasn't a lot there that I was inheriting from an employee standpoint.
Got it. No, that's interesting. And I guess just going back to, pre-close, how did you structure the deal? You had, mentioned to me before we were on that there was no personal guarantee or SBA loan on the deal. So how did you structure that deal?
Yeah. I basically went to him and said, "Hey, there's some really positive things here, but there isn't much that the SBA is going to really be able to lend on." So, I just kind of presented of "Hey, I'm interested. You guys have a really high quality business, but I don't really know how else I'm going to finance this," and just kind of left it at that and let the broker take that for what I was alluding to, but it was ultimately full seller finance. And they came back and said, "Hey, this is something, we'd consider." They really liked me and what I brought to the table. And so, yeah, I structured it where there was basically 30% down and 70% was going to be seller financed. That 30% down just came from all the deposits for future events. So I wasn't writing a check for that
Wow,
money. So yeah, on close, I was 20 grand out of my own pocket at that point, or it might have been 10 grand. And then, got a check basically for those future deposits, future liabilities, but I think $270,000 or something like that.
so you basically just rev shared the deposit. Oh no, they already came in. They were just okay,
They were
interesting.
deposits, yeah. I had, to deliver, I don't know what, $600,000 of services with this $270,000 that I received.
Right.
But it worked when you modeled it out. You're like, all right, like, we're gonna be
Yeah,
able to work this thing, and yeah, hopefully not ruin anyone's wedding, which we never did.
that's awesome. And how did you structure that seller financing piece?
Yeah, that was a 10-year note, or it was amortized over 10 years with a 3-year balloon. Um, and yeah, that was basically it. I bought the business for one times SDE, so it wasn't a huge chunk of my expenses on that seller carry piece.
That's great. I mean, that's amazing. How did you, I guess, why do you think the deal didn't sell for that 6 month period? Because you turned it down first, like 20, within
Yep.
24 hours. Why do you think it was on the market for so long? And because a lot of people say if a deal's been on the market for 6 months, might not be a good opportunity. What do you kind of say to that?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like a business in the traditional sense of, it's a husband and wife who run the show, so if they go away, effectively the business goes away. So I think anyone who saw that saw one of, there's a lot of, key man risk, And then, it's in a small town in Estes Park, Colorado, which is, largely a tourist town. Um, so people don't necessarily want to live there. Um, and yeah, there wasn't much substance to this business other than, hey, they've been booking stuff and they have a good reputation.
Got it. No, that's funny. And what did you look into during diligence when you were further vetting the deal? You already had visited. So what did you spend money on afterwards? You mentioned you were like 10K out of pocket.
Yeah, yeah, and that actually went into escrow as like a, good faith deposit. So and this is a common thread with my more recent acquisition as well, of something that I found really helps with due diligence is, your relationship with the seller. So the first thing that, with these two, husband and wife team, they were fully transparent, even if they weren't doing things that, exactly, should be the way they do it. They're like, hey, this is how we've been doing it. You could do it differently, but I had full trust of, what they're telling me is true. And so that helped a lot of, um where I was at. And then so I moved into a cabin that was right next to the wedding venue 30 days prior to close. So I was in the business for 30 days. And then the other piece was, there wasn't a big loan, there wasn't a ton of risk for me. So that all kind of suggested, that due diligence, I don't have to go get a Q of E and, spend 30 grand on legal fees. Because at the end of the day, if I go out of business, I give them the keys back. There's not a lot of risk to me if something happens. So yeah, I did all the, you know, financial due diligence, legal due diligence. My lawyer took care of a lot of that. And but it was more of just making sure, hey, is there everything aligned with what we need or what we're looking for, and just looking for any, kind of red flags, yellow flags, is anything amiss? And it wasn't. So it was a very quick due diligence period. And I'll stop talking there because I'll
No, no,
pause.
no. It's no, that's interesting. Why were they selling the business? What was their sort of incentives
They
to
were
sell for?
retirement age.
Oh, okay.
They'd been doing it for 30 years. They've done well. They had, house in Vale, a house in Estes Park, raised kids. And just we're at the point where, hey, if we don't sell this business for something like, we're going to be fine in retirement. So they, no one wanted it and they were ready to put it out of business. And that's why, someone like me who could continue it on, is going to be a financial windfall for them. And then, they still own the wedding venue. So I was going to pay them rent on top of, that seller carry.
Got it. And I was gonna ask about the real estate, but no, that makes a lot of sense. And did you end up ever purchasing that property or they just kept owning it?
I had first right, and had thought about it. It was a property that would need a lot of money put into it. Like it had a lot of deferred maintenance. So I played with the idea. And as I got further into, growing it and learning, maybe the growth prospects just of this area aren't quite as high as I initially thought. The prospect of buying the property made less sense to me.
Got it. Tell us about sort of that transition period. And you moved from, I guess, San Francisco to this cabin 30 days
Yep.
prior to close. Did you
Yep.
continue staying in that cabin? You just worked from there? What did that look like? How long were the sellers or like working with you to transition the business? And what did that also look like? Since obviously they were husband, wife, owner operators.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I lived in the cabin probably for 6 months. My now wife was in Denver, so I was commuting to see her, those sorts of things for the first 6 months. But yeah, I had written some contingencies, so it was 4 weeks, 40 hours, another 4 weeks at 10 hours, and then specifically with the chef, had another optional 8 weeks. Basically, just saying like if I can't find someone who can like you know, take over the chef. I need you around to cook because you don't want me cooking for, 200 people. Um, and so, yeah, part of that was I hired two chefs prior to owning the business, and said like, hey, this is your start date when I close, and I'm gonna have you get trained by the former chef. And yeah, so that was, the first 6 months were very much just like learning how to do every single job, from cleaning toilets to, preparing, to what do we need to actually write down that's never been written down, so that, it's not all just in my head, but, for someone else to, eventually take over some of these roles that largely fell on me.
And at what point did you start hiring bringing other people on and maybe think about growth more, going from sort of just like learning everything, being a sponge to actually thinking about like how do I grow this thing?
Pretty quick. So day one, I had two chefs. I'd hired the woman who'd done all the sales, so she was going to continue on. She'd done every role in there, so that was another kind of like lifeline. And then, yeah, about a month or
Why did she leave to begin with? Because you mentioned she like used to work for the business, but then stopped.
yeah, so seasonal business, like
Okay.
75% of the business is, within 6 months of the year. So we were into the winter. There wasn't a whole lot for her to do. As far as she knew, the business was going to go out of business. So she's like, yeah, all right, and she lived in Denver. So she's like, I'm gonna go, take some time off. And so I had talked to her very early on of like, hey, if this thing comes together, would you be open to coming back to, the company? And she said yes. Um, and so, yeah, about a month or two later, it was, into it, it was pretty clear that there is, very much an operational task of preparing for all of the, offsite weddings, coordination with, wedding planner or sales, with the kitchen, with the wait staff, sending the wait staff off. So that was the first key hire that was, really pulling me back from, I'm no longer a key piece of, keeping the proverbial train going down the tracks.
Got it. And what else did you focus on?
I mean, at that point, it was, more on Wix websites. The wedding venue didn't have a website.
Oh,
Um, relationship building within the community. It's a small, tight-knit community. So, immediately joined, or took over the spot with the wedding association, maintaining all those relationships with all these very high-end wedding venues that we were their, key caterer. Um, and just writing down processes. There wasn't a lot written down. There weren't, specific expectations. So something as simple as a checkout sheet at the end of an event, the wedding captain's going to fill out and say, hey, how'd the event go? How did everyone do? What can we do better? Some of these things of like, hey, we want to improve this process and we want everyone to be a part of it. Um, and yeah, just putting the framework in place that this is more of a business than just like, you know, two people who know everything and, been successful, but, want it to be repeatable and continue to execute at a high level.
I'm curious, what was it like running such a seasonal business? What were you kind of focused on in those down months versus the very busy months?
Yeah, it's weird running a seasonal business. For us, I bought it in March, so I was just kind of ramping up into the summer season, which is, obviously where you make all of your money. When we were looking at December and January, one, you're looking at, hey, where are my bookings, next summer? Luckily, you're getting those 50% deposits coming in the winter. So on a cash basis, it looks like you're making money. If
Right.
you look at, accrual basis, you're like, lost 20 grand last month. So luckily with that cash flow structure, we were not in a, tight cash position. But yeah, you're looking at the calendar and you say, hey, we have three weddings this entire month. And my employees were on salary. It was, largely a, what are we going to do to stay busy? And it's, we're going to get our liquor license and, move the office upstairs so we can create a bar. And but yeah, it was kind of a interesting dynamic. I certainly didn't like it.
That's interesting. I'm curious, you mentioned some of the great things about the business, just with the cash conversion cycle, which by the way is awesome. I think a lot of people would be very jealous to have that. What were like the main challenges running this type of business?
Yeah, I mean, biggest one is labor. You're in a small mountain town that doesn't have a lot of people, that doesn't have good childcare, that does not have affordable housing. So people are commuting, up from Fort Collins or Longmont, to just getting people to show up. And we were paying very, very, I'd say above average wages. So there's a continued flow through of the wait staff, who are is a second and third job for a lot of people. Um, and so that was extremely challenging and something we always had to be on top of hiring, like constantly hiring, staffing. And yeah, hospitality and industry in general is challenging with labor and year-round alcohol, things like that. So that's probably one of the key challenges that I found with the business.
And you said that, you lived in the cabin for 6 months. What happened afterwards? Did you also move, back to Denver, or what did that look like? Or were you still around the business year round?
Yeah, yeah. My wife was really good about. I didn't know what I was doing. I was still working 80 hours, at that point, and like very much like in it. And so, hiring that operations person, and then my wife's like, I haven't really seen you that much. You wanted to, work on the business, not in the business. So she was good about pushing me of, hey, like, think about this and, transition. So that after 6 months, you'll transition to, maybe I'm up there a few days a week to, further down the line of, ultimately renting out the cabin and, commuting up to Estes Park, a few days a week and living in Denver. But I kept the cabin for a while, and it was good to have as well. Like, people aren't able to go back down the hill, if there's unsafe, staff could potentially stay there, things like that.
Got it. Got it. And you had mentioned that to me earlier that you were able to grow that business quite a bit. What were some of the things you did that you think contributed to the growth and um eventually I guess to just the overall success of the business that made it, so valuable that someone else wanted to come and acquire it.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, repeatable processes that aren't relying on me. It was very much by the end of it of, hey, this is a business where the owner, there wasn't much training for me to do. So it's like everyone who's doing their jobs is better at them than I could ever be. And I have an accountant and a CPA, so like the books are, there. So largely my role became, a presence, sometimes helping with hiring. On the really busy days, I'd still be up there just to be around, and it's a buzzing place if you got three weddings going on. Um, so I think that was important, and then a lot of the other just frameworks of a good business. So we had a website, we had SEO, we had a process in place. If someone inquires, we're gonna call them immediately. The process of how we, present, what our services are and why we're different, and really kind of just narrowing down like what our, unique selling propositions were and things like that.
And what did you think was the maybe key driver of more bookings overall? Because ultimately that's what grew the business.
Yeah, I mean, more bookings first and foremost would be where are we catering, where are we not catering? So there's venues, down Lions 20 minutes away, the Stanley, which is Estes Park is most known for. We were not on their preferred list. There's a few other venues that, existed. Maybe they didn't do, 100 weddings a year, but they still did, 20, 30 weddings. And then there's other places people would get married that maybe aren't your, traditional wedding venue, like, big Airbnb, things like that. So that was largely just who are those people? How do I go out and meet them? Show them the value that we have. And for a lot of these people, it's how my company going to make your life easier? You're running a venue. You don't want to have to deal with the caterer and their issues. So if someone can show up, know your entire venue, leave the place cleaner than they found it, and make your life easier, you're going to want to work with us again. So bringing that to more places was our lowest hanging fruit, and then telling people like, hey, we actually cater at all these other places, and then venue owners would end up selling us, work with Jubilations, because they're the easiest company to work with and they do a great job.
That's fantastic to build that reputation. I'm curious, what was the split between the catering business versus the wedding venue then?
Yeah, so there are. very high end, we're talking six-figure weddings. And then, catering is going to be, 20% of that. So majority of the revenue, I'd say 70% would be coming from offsite catering. So we're going to these really high-end venues and doing the catering there for, 150, 200, 250 people. And the other 30% was our on-site venue, which would hold 50 to 60 people, and was largely, more of a, cost-effective venue. So it's very different clientele, but we could also upsell, a rehearsal dinner at our venue if you're, going to be at, a different venue.
Got it. How did the margins compare across the two businesses? And did you accept deposits on both? Is that how it worked? Amazing.
Yeah, deposits on both. I mean, the margins in weddings in general are very expensive. Wedding catering, we're, a really good wedding, you're north of $100 a person, all in with staffing, food cost, um, all those sorts of things. So your food cost, is probably 15% of that $100 or so. Um, staffing's, going to be in there as well. But so all that to say, your net margin is, considerably higher than maybe your average business specific to wedding catering. If you get into other types of catering, corporate catering, that's more normalized to, any traditional business.
Was there a certain sort of margin that you guys were targeting, or what would be, for someone right now who's looking at maybe buying a wedding venue or a wedding catering business, like
Mhm.
what would be considered, strong margin to be looking for, to be aiming for?
Yeah, I mean, north of 20%.
Great.
Um, yeah, it just really depends. There's a lot of different variables, with any business. But yeah, no, it's a very profitable endeavor.
And tell us more about sort of, what led up to the sale. Or did you always know you were going to sell the business eventually, when you first acquired it? And did you like decide to list it? Someone approach you? What happened there?
Great question. Yeah. Going in, I had no aspirations to sell the business. Definitely not as quick as I did. I went in of, like, hey, this is going to be a nice transition away from, corporate job. It's going to be repeatable and can do it for a long time. Um, as I got to know everyone basically that we worked with, I started learning, hey, we're doing 60% of your weddings. We're doing 40% of your weddings. And then even when we got into these other venues, it's like, okay, we're already gaining market share. So it became apparent to me real quick that, you know, you could probably double this business, the top line revenue. There isn't, a much more beyond that. So as we were growing, 20% top line year over year, starting to get the idea of, you know, if I really want to do what I want to do, which is grow a business and not, just for a year or two, it's going to take expansion. So I looked at buying another big time venue that also had catering. But kind of I came down to, is this, what I want to commit the next 10 or 20 years of my life to, and then go commit, $500,000 to expand into, a geographic area where we had zero presence. And that just didn't really make sense from, I'm very much focused on risk, and that risk reward ratio wasn't as high as the initial acquisition. So that started to get me to think of, I'm kind of bored now that we've got processes in place and, we're doing great, but, I could just see that, topping out. So that was the initial thought. And then I thought I could go sell without a broker. So I just started reaching out to all of our competitors. I got, I think, 7 NDAs back, had some good conversations. One of our competitors, we had agreed on a price. They had come and, inspected, the whole property. But, this individual was a chef and was, unwilling to sign an non-binding LOI, but was telling me, 100% I'm going to buy it. And so it became apparent, like, I don't really think, like this is going to work out.
And at that point, how much had you grown the business, and how long was this? I guess we didn't really talk about timelines.
Yeah, this is like, I sold it at 20 months of ownership.
Wow.
So the first year we did 20%. We were on track for 20% on top of that. Um, top line revenue. And yeah.
How did that translate to the bottom line? Because you're obviously adding in maybe more
Yeah,
people.
from what I bought it, so when I bought it, it was like 400K SDE, but that's with a husband and wife salary in there. So by the end of it, I was roughly at that same number. Basically, I just been reinvesting a lot of, profits into we are going to hire people. We are going to, add benefits that didn't exist. We're going to reinvest into, some of the outdated equipment that we've been using. Um, so, that went from top line when I bought it, I think it was about $1 million revenue, and then 40% FTE. By the end of it, I think we were on pace for what 1.4, 1.5 top line revenue and kind of that same 400K SDE number on the bottom.
But with obviously a team and not the husband wife taking
Yes,
a
yes,
salary.
exactly. A lot had been added. So yes, the percentages don't look as good, but it was, much more robust business with processes in place.
That's fantastic. And what ended up happening then? It didn't work out reaching out to these venues directly. So what happened
Yep.
next?
Yeah, I listed it with a broker. Um, listed it for a lot more than I was going to sell it for. And yeah, I got some inquiries, a local family office who owns just a bunch of ancillary businesses, expressed a lot of interest and toured it and, liked, um, everything that they saw and then ultimately, yeah, present an offer and then we were able to close pretty quick as well.
What was that period of time like from when you actually signed the broker, or actually maybe just when you started thinking about selling it, and then to when you signed the broker, and then to when that deal actually transacted?
Yeah, I probably started thinking like the thought came about maybe 8 months prior to the actual, the business is sold. And it was about 2 months from listing the business to the close. I think maybe 3 weeks from listing the business to we're under LOI. And they were cash buyers, so there wasn't, an SBA loan or anything to deal with.
That's incredibly fast. That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I prepared it all as if I was the broker. So, the data room was all set up and again, small multiples, so that 2 times, rather than 1 time. And we had a bunch of deposits which transfer. So it just works itself out to not be like, a huge amount of money that someone's having to outlay to buy the business.
So they must have thought the broker did a great job.
Something like that. Yeah, yeah.
I love that. Well, tell us, tell us about you sold the business and you just acquired another one. What happened in
Correct.
between? Did you always know, okay, I'm gonna buy another business, I'm gonna do this again? Or what was the kind of thought process there? Because you knew you didn't want to go buy another wedding venue and sort of expand that way. So what kind of happened next? Did you know that this was the path you were gonna go down? You're now gonna maybe buy a solar company or
Yeah,
what?
I didn't know. I knew I had a ton of fun owning, operating, being, responsible for, two of the chefs or both the chefs were able to purchase a home while, they worked for me. Things I think a
Amazing.
lot of chefs can't do. So all of that was, really motivating. There's things I obviously didn't like, but I didn't see, going back and getting a corporate job, the next thing that I was going to do. So I always knew, probably going to stick in the entrepreneurial world, probably going to be another business, learned way more than anything else I'd ever done in my entire life. Um, but yeah, attempted to take some time off, which I'm not very good at, because I was like, had to actively work.
Classic entrepreneur behavior.
Yeah, I'm sure you felt the exact same way.
Yep.
But yeah, focused on learning, and networking, did a little bit of traveling. But yeah, it became apparent of, buying a business, that's a little bit bigger, that isn't, a 3 hour daily commute. Um, and it still has some of the, aspects that I really enjoy, was where I kind of landed. So I wanted and this is, last year. So buying business is, very much an attractive thing now, and it's, not so esoteric. So I was pretty convinced that going off market and building a relationship, was going to be able to get me the size of business that I wanted, and, hopefully a little bit easier than, having to compete with, at least here in Colorado, there's 10 offers in the first day. When a business gets listed, that's a good one.
Tell us more about going off market this time around, and like how did you approach that? What worked and what didn't work?
Yeah, I'm a sales guy, so I was, talking to other people about, what had been working for them, and, just firing off a ton of generic emails that had not. And so I was like, I'm gonna work harder. My pitch is gonna be better, and I'm gonna be more personable and likable than, your average cold emailer out there. Um, so my approach was largely hit them from as many angles as possible. So they're seeing my name, hearing my story, and then eventually I'm going to get, a touch point where I can connect with people. So I had, a business that I put an LOI on. It took me 15 contact touches before he took my call. Um, and a few other examples of, it's going to take 10 to 15 contact points before I'm actually going to get anywhere. So persistence was the key. And yeah, it's searching is not fun. It's a grind. It's a whole week where you're like, did I do anything this week? Was there any benefit?
Yeah.
And I know you know that
I
probably
feel like
quite
it's a,
well.
I think it's a common sort of mistake. People just, they they email once and they're like, I didn't hear back. Okay, this doesn't work. It's
Yeah,
very much a
we
persistence game.
totally. Yeah, I had known that from, being in sales, but I'm not sure that, other people who maybe don't have that same background of like, I'm gonna bother this person 15 times until they tell me like, stop emailing me, like I have no interest in you, go away. Yeah, that's what you got to do.
So were you mostly cold emailing them, but just, like being more personable there, or were you cold calling? Were you just like what else were you doing?
Yep. Yeah. So I was not in Colorado at this point. And we'd been traveling, so I was remote, even though my whole pitch is like, hey, I'm from Colorado. I'm a local person. I'm never going to move away. Um, but yeah, I would basically get my list, use Data Axle for that, and then I had a whole like automation sequence. So basically, I'd be adding people on LinkedIn. I would do highly personalized emails using AI at scale. So no emails that I was sending were the exact same. The subject line is tailored to that business's owner, something like that. A few sentences would say, specifics, like very specific things about their business that you could tell were unique. And then have analytics of, hey, they opened my email twice, or they went to my website, or they linked, clicked on my link. And that's going to trigger, I'm going to cold call these people because they've, opened my email twice or been to my website. They've expressed some sort of interest beyond, just I'm going to call a cold list. And I did call lists for just random people for businesses I really liked. But that was kind of the process of, have a huge funnel, and then as people express some sort of interest, cold call, and then continue to like double down on the people who expressed interest but maybe didn't reply to the email.
No, that's super interesting. I'm curious because you mentioned using Data Axle. Did you find that you were contacting a lot of businesses that were smaller? Or at this point, you said you were targeting sort of a larger deal. So how did you kind of vet businesses, especially off market where it's challenging to really know how big these businesses are, like how much EBIT or SDE they're doing? What was your
Yeah.
process there?
Yeah. I mean, there's no way to know, right? It's a private business where no one has that information. The best proxy that I could find, I'd be curious what you found, but the best proxy I could find is number of employees.
Yes,
So
100% employee count.
yeah, 10 to 100, and I'll talk to I'll talk to you in there. Was what I went with, and there's a lot of junk, right? And there's a lot of people that are financials that I got back where it was clearly not going to be a fit. One thing I would still lead this even in my follow-up emails is like, I might not be the right fit, but I'm connected to, over 100 plus people here in the Denver area who have different backgrounds, different criteria, and are actively, good, hardworking people who want to buy a business. So I can make these connections, potentially, mentor, invest, kind of similar to you do, but add value to these people, even if, I'm not the right person. So I did take some people's time, but they'd come to me and say, Nick, this wasn't a waste of time. I got to, there are benefits for me. And even just for a business owner to think about, like, what is it like when I don't have to have this business is really valuable for a lot of people who've never had the time to really think about what's next.
And I feel like a lot of, business owners obviously know each other. So um, for me, I feel like, even if this business might not be the right one, they might know someone else. And um, it's
Totally.
it's it's interesting though because I mean it's great that you had the persistence to keep going. I think the common thing I see is people kind of give up when they're like, I spoke to one off market seller and it was too small, so all of these don't work.
Yeah.
And it's just like you're finding that one gem, right? That's the right size, that has all the attributes, and that's where I think off market becomes sort of challenging.
Totally. I mean, it's a mental game too. I mean, 6 months in, you're like, the three, people in my pipeline are no good. Like, I'm going to get to a year into this thing and have nothing to show for it. It's a scary proposition, but you got to rely and trust and not let that kind of impact, which is much easier said than done. So
100%. So tell us, like, how long did it take for you to find this deal that you just closed on not that long ago? What did that look like? How many businesses? Okay, actually give us some context. How many businesses did you reach out to? How
Mhm.
many do you think you had like actual conversations with? And then how long did it take for you to find this one and then close on it?
Yep. So it was my search was about 6 months in total. I believe there was about 3,000 companies that fit my criteria of 40-mile radius, within Denver, 750 to 2 million, EBITDA. Um, and then from there,
Certain industries where you, or at this point where you like, I have a sense now that I've bought a business and sold it, or
yeah, I was going wide purely because there's not that many businesses in medical waste disposal within 40 miles within this size. Um, the solar company was not, initially in these criteria, but it made it in there one way or another. But yeah, it's again kind of your traditional, businesses that like I could feasibly own and operate and hopefully add value to. Um,
that's great that you were so flexible. I feel like that's also a common thing. Common mistake is like on the off market side, just hone it on one and you're in one city. You're like, well, it's probably like 40 businesses.
yeah. The odds are already against me. So, and I like going and getting coffee with a business owner for, who's done this for 30 years. They're interesting people. And if there's nothing that comes from it, like I had an interesting conversation with, a local business owner and I thoroughly enjoyed that. And I know a lot of them did as well. So I would take calls that, I was like, I'm probably not going to have this business, but I don't know what I don't know. And the, wedding venue exemplified that there's really good businesses out there that I one would never know exist, would never know about their, financial, cash conversion cycle, things like that. So very open mind. I just love learning. So all of those things, like maybe I should have even had it wider. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Let me
And
answer your question though. So it was 3,000 businesses. I sent 8,800 emails. I think I did 850 cold calls. Um, 600 added LinkedIn people. So I think that's probably like 3,000 LinkedIn requests. Um, I never got to cold or into direct mail, but I was going to do like a highly customized direct mail campaign. Was going to be my next thing.
And did the cold calls work, or was it the
Oh
cold
yeah,
email? Yeah.
super effective. Best, you know, after the emails once you set them up and have the analytics are good, but spending an hour of my time every day cold calling or 2 hours was by far the most effective use of my time. And you just have to like have your pitch down and know what to say to, someone who's not the right person, to
Tell
draw
us
up
about that.
interest.
I think a lot of people are scared to pick up the phone.
It
Um,
sucks.
and
It
so
really
tell
sucks.
tell us what was the script that worked for you? You know, you're picking up the phone. It's most likely not the owner. Um, what was your script
Yeah, I
or
mean,
your pitch?
would be try to get the owner's contact information first and foremost. So yeah, I mean, if I was talking to an owner, it would sound something like this. It'd be like, um, "Hi, this is Nick. Calling for you know Helen." Like, okay. I know you weren't expecting this call, so I'll be brief out of respect for your time. And what that says is, yes, you're getting cold called, but now you have 20 seconds where they're going to listen to you before they hang up. I say, my name's Nick Patrick. I'm a Colorado native and experienced business owner. I'm actively searching for one business to acquire, and I was really impressed by what you've done with XYZ company. Love to set up a 10 to 15-minute call if you have any interest in potentially considering a sale. Something like that.
And what were the responses like? No, was it mostly people I'm not interested by? A lot of people want to talk. What did that look like?
Yeah, more people would be open to a conversation than you'd guess. A lot of people would say no or a few years, and then you send them a follow-up email saying, "Hey, I'm going to give you 10 grand for a referral and really appreciate everything you've done and who you are." Uh, some people will be scared. They're like, "I can't talk about this on the phone." I'm like, 100% understand. I was in the exact same boat. I can send an NDA over after this call. And then some people say, "What are you looking for? What do you know about my business?" was a common one. And so you better have an answer at that point,
Yeah,
or be quick on your toes if you don't. Um, and so people would have a conversation with you right there about, you know, who I am, or a lot of people would tell me about kind of their journey. So it could go a multitude of ways. But I would, usually, and these are people who are somewhat interested, but usually, if I did 20 calls in one day, usually get something that was confidence inspiring.
that's a really good hit rate compared to cold emailing.
Oh yeah. No, yeah, you could send, 10,000 cold emails and like get two things from it.
That's no, that's super interesting. What about if you called and it was an employee?
Depends, but I would say, "Hey, this is Nick Patrick calling for, Jeff Smith." And they're like, "Okay." And I'll be like, "Yeah, should be expecting my call. You just pass on my name and number. I'd appreciate it." It's real simple. They've seen my name a few times, they've seen my emails. So it's like, little cheeky. But I found them let because you don't want to tell them like, "Hey, I'm trying to buy the business that you work
Yeah,
for."
yeah.
And so, yeah, I would leave it pretty general and just say, should be expecting my call, name, number, and then, if someone wanted more details, just say, confidential matter, something along those lines. Because again, you don't want it to
Yeah,
be, discussed with an employee. Like, yeah. So, yeah,
that's
leave it.
interesting. That's great advice. How did it go with the solar company owner? Um, was it cold calling, cold emailing that worked, and then
That was an email, and they said they'd be up to. A lot of my emails would talk about local. I live 10 minutes away. Love to buy you a cup of coffee, something like that. And that's what we
and did
ended
you
up.
did you fly over then and meet him?
The second day we got back to Colorado, I had a full week of in person. 'Cause I had kind of been pushing off like the in person. I did fly back, once, but I've been pushing them off. So I think I met, something like 10 owners in 5 days that first week, and my
Good for
wife and I
you.
got back to Denver. So this was one of those appointments that I had, scheduled 2 weeks prior or something like that.
I think one of the biggest challenges people have with these off-market deals is just timing and maybe education. How did you manage to get a deal closed so quickly in those off-market? Was the seller already pretty educated on valuation and things like that, or how did you kind of approach that conversation?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I was pretty good on the front end, by a second appointment of explaining, hey, here are the steps. You need to get a third party advisor, who's going to represent your best interests. And then just kind of outline like, hey, we're gonna have this conversation. We're gonna sign an NDA. I'm gonna send you a few basic requests, 3 years of P&L, maybe balance sheet, and then something else, specific to their business, just to see if it's in the right criteria. And even if it's not for me, I could give you a ballpark of what it might be worth if you want to sell it. I then tell them, hey, ballpark, this is roughly what I could pay, high level, and then just kind of see, are we in the right field? And then from there, kind of outline, hey, here are the next steps. Here's how I'm planning to finance it. Actually, I would mention that earlier just to show I'm a vetted buyer. And just, here's the timelines. It's going to be a lot of work. So kind of just set them up, hopefully for success. Um, these specific sellers had entertained selling it in the past. So they, had an idea. Um, I didn't give them a ballpark because I wasn't really sure about the industry as a whole, but I ended up just writing a high level LOI at a multiple I felt, represented the risk of the industry and such. Um, and they didn't say no, which I was like, oh, okay, interesting. I was expecting a no, but yeah.
But and when you mentioned that, you told them they needed to get a third party advisor, were you referring to hiring a broker? Were you referring to like CPAs, legal advisor, things like that?
Not hiring a broker, but someone who's been through this process before. So for these sellers, their CPA had actually done, 100 business transactions. They already had that, but you know, likely a lawyer, but someone, because if someone's going to go try to sell their business on their own, it's so complicated. If they try to do it, like the deal's not going to go through. There's just so many things where I'm at an advantage because I've done this before, and that is going to come off of, I didn't know that that's what this meant, or, inventory, or, work in process, anything like that's going to get in the way in my experience. So just, it looks good from my perspective, like get someone who's got your best interests, so that we can, increase our likelihood of this transaction actually going through.
No, that's great advice, especially because there is that misalignment, I think, in just general education on the sell side. So
Yeah, you want to set them up for success. Like, you don't,
100%.
this is a relationship. Like, I don't want to just, it's not like, here's the keys, see you later. It's, the last business and this current business, like, owners should be able to come back, come hang out with the team. Like, this is fun. This is exciting. This is exciting for you. It's exciting for me. It's not see you later type of thing. And that's not what I was looking for, at least from a transaction.
That's great, and that makes a lot of sense. Tell us about more about the risks of the industry. Obviously, it's probably one of the first things you had in mind, especially with the new administration. So, very curious, sort of how you thought about that. Looking to buy a solar business right now, closing a deal 2.5 months ago. How do you think about that, and what kind of diligence did you do, and kind of where's your head at now?
Yeah, I mean, solar was scary for a multitude of reasons. Initially, and largely still is, right? Because things are changing. So yeah, the biggest component for me, at least in due diligence, was I really don't know anything about this industry. Like I've heard it's crazy, and I see the headlines of big companies going out of business. So it was key for me to hire, people who are in the industry who can talk to me about what I'm looking at from due diligence perspective, and also the broader um, landscape. And so yeah, that's what I did. And yeah, it took a while to get comfortable with, hey, there are variables in this industry that are going to be outside of my control. And so I can, theoretically, I could do everything right. And there still are variables that could, impact businesses like mine and other ones. So yeah, we got to the point where or I'll just pause there, ask any more
No,
follow-up
no,
questions.
no. Keep going. It's super interesting. Who did you, I guess one follow-up would be who'd you bring on for those advisors this time around?
Yeah, so I had CPA. Gale CPA, shout out to them. They're great because I fired about six before that. Do a lot of the proof of cash, quality earnings type stuff. Have my lawyer already. And then I like to hire, like a deal coach, kind of like, a therapist almost of no deliverables, but we're going to meet weekly, bi-weekly and like look through some of the stuff and like, second opinion, but like I'm paying you. So it's not like a mentor that I'm like consistently asking for your time.
Yep.
And then I ended up hiring a like subject matter expert. So friend now, but was father-in-law's former coworker who had a ton of experience in the space. And I was just like, can I pay you to like talk to me about solar and installation and what I should be looking at here?
I
So that
think
was
that's
kind of
very
my team.
underrated. That's incredibly, I mean, shrewd of you to hire a subject matter expert. I think people don't do that enough. How did you go about finding that person, compensating that person? What should people be doing there if they're also, because a lot of people are obviously buying a business they have no experience in from an industry
Yeah.
perspective.
Yeah. I mean, I this was personal network, so there's you know friend of a friend has experience in just about everything. So if you can find that person, I wouldn't say go hire the XYZ due diligence firm. Like just go find someone who's done this for their entire life and be like, I paid $200 an hour to talk to you, once a week, or twice a week. Like that's really money that's really well spent. Or you could probably go to industry, type stuff and just find people and send 20 messages on LinkedIn and someone's probably not working right now and would gravitate to what you're doing because it's unique and interesting.
And how long did you work with the subject matter expert for?
Every single week, from yeah, every week. And I just had questions, I'd bring them, I'd share, all the due diligence stuff and we just would talk through it. And that would leave me a lot of, homework to go figure out the next week.
And how did you ultimately end up getting, I guess, more comfortable enough to actually close the deal?
Yeah, I mean, it's largely in this common thread through my entire life, risk adjusted standpoint. So, a common multiple for, a business like this is going to be a lot lower than, hey, it's a commercial cleaning business with, 95% recurring revenue. And, so getting comfortable with, yeah, there's non-linear upside, but there is, more downside into a, sales-based business in a, you know, less mature industry. So thinking about, hey, where's my break even and what, drawdown of, if we go down 30% top line, like, am I still cash flowing? And so that number for me was we could fall in half and still be meeting debt service. And then, still have some buffer where, I'm keeping a roof over my head.
Hopefully one with solar on it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So in due time, in due time.
What and I guess tell us about more about the industry right now. For someone who's, you've become, I guess, somewhat of a subject matter expert now that you've been running the business for a little bit, but for someone who's looking at maybe entering the industry or looking at buying a solar business, what would you say to them right now?
Yeah, I don't think it's really an industry to get into if this is your first go at it. And really, any sort of just unless you have sales experience, a project-based business probably isn't the best place to jump into this because you have to figure out how to run a business, how to manage people, how to balance the books, and then also how to keep sales coming in. And the company that I bought has a very robust sales team. Most businesses that, me and you are going to be looking at, the owner's doing a lot of the sales. So those just present, excess risk unless, the operator can, mitigate those risks. So I would probably not look at a business like this unless, you have a specific reason to.
No, that makes sense. And how'd you finance it this time? How did you structure the deal and finance it this time around?
Yeah, SBA loan, seller carry on basically a third, and then SBA loan on the other two-thirds. I did some of the structuring so I could really minimize my down payment of two different seller carry notes. one being interest only, for the first 2 years, so that money counted as equity. Um, and then the other chunk is 10-year amortization, 5-year balloon, kind of like last time.
And so did you put like 5% down at the end, or where were you at ultimately in terms of your down payment?
Yeah, I think 2.5%.
Incredible.
Yeah, yeah. So that, I mean, this deal looks really good on paper. It's more of, hey, there are risks, and a lot of things that exist beyond an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, 100%. But I mean, minimizing your downside 100%.
Yeah, and that
Um,
protects everyone, like that's good for the bank, that's good for the sellers, that's good for the employees of everyone can understand. It's like, there's risk and things adjust. And so that, in my opinion, sets everyone else up for success in a business where, um, it's not 100% recurring revenue.
Now you're 2.5 months in. What are some of the, I guess, big takeaways so far, and how's it been going?
Yeah. Knock on wood, everything's been going better than I could have expected. Like
Amazing.
teams jazzed. Nobody's quit yet. People are excited. And so things are going really well. Obviously you've got to keep the sales pipeline rolling. That's going to be, kind of where I spending a lot of my time. Um,
And
so
how big is the business roughly? Because it hasn't seems like a robust team in place, and you were looking to go bigger this time around. So
yeah, we're 25 employees. And then in the like high seven figures of revenue. So yeah, it's considerably bigger.
that's great. And were you, I guess first, do you feel like you're still, absorbing, learning? Are you, I mean, obviously, hopefully less working in the business as the last one where you were cleaning toilets, but what does your day-to-day look like now, 2.5 months into a bigger business?
Yeah. I mean, I spend a lot of my time focused on, sales automation. Not a lot was quantified before, so want everywhere we spend marketing dollars quantified in terms of leads, cost of acquisition. So just I've been building a lot of that, and just, looking at what's been done historically. But yeah, goal is really not to change anything. Like they've figured out this business. It's been around 10 years. It's been profitable. So really not changing any of the key things. Like we're posting on Instagram that used to not happen, stuff like that. But yeah, just learning for me, learning about electricity, like it's complicated, so I'm enjoying that. And there's a CEO who really good at operations, so I've been just learning from him as well. So just taking it all in and just trying to increase our sales while maintaining extremely high level of service.
That's great that there's a CEO in place already. I feel like that's not super common. Do you feel like because of that, you don't need to be as sort of in the business, or how does it feel
100%.
like?
Yeah,
Could you take a week off right now and feel okay about it?
yeah, absolutely.
Amazing.
Yeah, this is not something I was looking for, but was like, oh, that's awesome. And yeah, so I didn't have to jump in and worry about, running crews and bidding, commercial jobs and some of these things where, you could get into, you know, you know, a sticky situation pretty quick, your first week on the job. And he was a big proponent of the transition and what I brought to the table. So largely helped in terms of communicating to the other employees and getting them on board with the transition too. So highly recommended if you have the opportunity.
Yeah, and so the CEO is already in place. How did you think about incentivizing said person? I think that's like always a big question I get, which is, if I bring someone on or if there's someone already in place, how do I make sure they're incentivized to help me keep growing, running the business?
Yeah, the cool thing about the solar industry is everybody from people who are setting appointments to the salespeople to the CEO is it is very well aligned with the incentives. So a lot like for anyone in kind of the sales or CEO position, like their range of variable pay ranges, up to 50% of total compensation based on, just alignment of your success meeting your goals and, success of the company. So it was very variable dependent, but really largely aligns, the incentive structure to what I want to see, to what the business wants to see. Just longevity of the business too.
That's great.
Yeah, it's
That
cool. It's
that's awesome.
very,
Something we should bring
very
into every business. I like that.
in theory. I don't know if it works quite like that in every business, but for me, I'm like, this works really well, and it aligns what we want people to be doing.
No, that makes sense. I know we're way over on time, so thank you for being so generous. I guess, final maybe question or two. What are you most
Yep.
excited about in the coming year, 3 years? You're a little bit, you're 2.5 months in, so
Yep.
very early days still.
Yeah, I am by nature, learning is what motivates me, and that's what has frustrated me in the past of hitting a cap of learning. So this industry is constantly changing. We have all sorts of different technologies and batteries and things with the utilities that are going to be changing. And so always having to be on your toes is an advantage in this industry. And so I'm excited, one, to continue to learn, but to continue to adapt the business to hopefully stay on the cutting edge of whatever the future throws at us.
Awesome. And any final words of wisdom for first timers out there buying their first business? What do you have to say to
Yep.
them?
Network, network, network. Bother anybody who has experience in this and see if they'll talk to you. Build a group of people who will give you some of their time or share those frustrations of I made it, 100 cold calls and nothing happened. Someone else who's in that similar boat. That's going to make it a lot easier. And then when you got these questions or challenges, you have a support network to bounce your ideas off.
That's great advice. And Nick, if anyone wants to reach out after listening to this, where's the best place to find you?
Twitter, LinkedIn, email, whatever.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Nick. You're very generous with your time today. Congratulations on all your successes and super excited to keep following along. Uh, very eager to hear where this latest venture takes you.
Same for you, Helen. I appreciate your interest in talking with me, and yeah, hopefully it can be helpful for others.
Awesome. Stay in touch.